I'm going to sit down here with Jake, who's got his dog Bubba. Jake, who is homeless. Jake, you've found yourself some shelter here. Why are you outside during this entire hurricane?
Well, I chose not to go inside yesterday because the Salvation Army and Russian Wind's homeless shelter, where they were accepting people, were caught killing everybody that was in there.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Okay. All right. So clearly you're homeless.
Were caught killing everybody that was in there.
Some of the people that were going to the FEMA fusion centers were not to be heard or seen from again. Rescue response for Hurricane Harvey. And the first thing that I noticed there, that it was like the purge. All I could hear that night was car alarms going off and glass breaking and gunshots. Luckily, I was able to bed down and get things ready and unpack my guns and ammunition, and I got zero sleep that first night. We made our way down to Katy, Texas, and when we got there, we were stopped because they had finally blocked the roads down, and we were just off of I-10 where they had FEMA, National Guard, DEA, FBI, Secret Service. They had emergency management from Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, and others there. And it was a big clusterfuck because they were just running around like not doing anything but stroking each other, because that was happening down there. I think it's still happening down there. Some of the homeless people were freaked out. Thomas Jefferson High School in Port Arthur had a lot of people evacuated by plane, and there was at least 1,500 that were left behind that refused to get on the FEMA planes because they said that they were not making their destinations. They were not showing up in certain areas. And those people, I don't know where they were going. The 1,500 that were there, we sent a security force over to, because they almost started rioting at the Thomas Jefferson High School in Port Arthur because of the way they were being treated. And again, I'm going to tell people, we've talked about this for years, for fucking years. We talked about this. Don't go to the FEMA centers. This shit's very real. I just experienced it firsthand, and I've come home to decompress over these issues. 11 p.m. was scheduled to be the release of the blowing of the dam, and at least 3 of the rescuers that I talked to said that the dam had started to fail, and there was a moon-shaped spot in the top of it where water had been coming over and been washing part of the dam away. So people were saved. We rallied back at the Crossing Church, where they basically wrapped everything up for today, and they told the stories of what had been happening. At least one boat had been in another neighborhood and pulled out at least 100 people themselves from that area. And let me tell you something. These stories that you're seeing on CNN and Fox News and stuff about government officials going out on boats and pulling people in and rescuing them were designed as propaganda to let you know that the government was taking care of you, when in all actuality they were not doing evacuations. They were locking down the highways, they were locking down these neighborhoods, and they were going to flood these people in their homes. But if you hear part of the background story of what was actually going on down there, then it brings credence to those who put out some of these theories because they have read the FEMA papers, or they have read the government documents into these things. Now, and what has brought this up today for me to finally discuss this openly is the fact that FEMA is trying to put their prison ships out at Port Arthur, Texas, to give a place for people to live because their homes have been destroyed or whatever. I later found out that even though we were stopped at this FEMA resource center and this government makeshift resource center at the mall. And let me tell you, and you'll get part of this out of my story, that they do use malls, they do use Walmarts, they do use these other places to set up FEMA and to create FEMA centers in these natural disasters. I saw it firsthand. Some of the people that were going to the FEMA fusion centers were not to be heard or seen from again. I got the rundown from the militia that night about other things that were going on, and I couldn't talk about it at the time because of operational security, but now I'm in the Ozark Mountains. I'm back in Missouri for a minute, and I'm in a little better place to actually be able to tell this story. I do have some pictures and some videos to verify some of the things that I'm talking about, or the fact that I was even there. For the most part, I didn't get to videotape a lot of the things that I wanted to because of security at the time, and because of on Facebook and social media, I was talking about supplies and helping out people, but the very reality of the fact was I was using those boats and I was using those people and those supplies to make sure that armed militia were going in. And I believe wholeheartedly that we stopped a gun confiscation, and we stopped them from murdering a lot of people. And the only reason why Hurricane Harvey was not Katrina was because of the Cajun Navy, the Texas Navy, and the response from Texans on their own soil that was saving tens of thousands of lives that I witnessed firsthand, while the government was locking down roads and barricading people from being able to help. Within 24 hours, I had more than $50,000 to $100,000 worth of supplies showing up on trucks, along with over 100 armed men and women and medics and corpsmen and people who are not your bullshit militia spouting keyboard warriors that you see on the internet all the time. These are guys who are hardcore motherfuckers that were ready to go in to these little towns and these neighborhoods where they were not doing evacuations, that they were flooding and preparing. FEMA and other people were flooding these small towns without doing evacuations and didn't care if people were dying. The private contractors came in, tried to disarm us, tried to take over our supplies, and I wasn't having any of it. The guy that was working with me hand in hand started carrying around an ice pick because the contractor had threatened his life, and he was ready to stab this guy in his neck because he straight up threatened our lives. I had my .357 on my hip the whole time that I was there, and this contractor was talking to us about open carrying and scaring people, but the real reality is they were trying to control the situation and take over, for whatever reason, supplies and to get those armed men out of there. And he tried to take my .357 off my hip, in which case my retention skills that I've done, whether the open carry movement or my training in other areas I'm not going to talk about, I put my elbow directly on my gun as soon as he tried to grab it, smacked his arm away, and had to inform him I was going to shoot him in his head if he tried to touch my gun again, because they were trying to take over and threaten our operation of protecting Texans so that they could get away with whatever they were getting away with, hiding bodies, covering up things that were going on. Some of the neighborhoods that those guys were going into were the richest neighborhoods and were involved in, I believe, government looting or private contractor looting. So we slept in the back corner of the pastor's office that night, and the next morning we had already had everything set up, and we got up and we sent everybody out in 8 to 10 different directions where they couldn't be followed, and they went to their respective places, to these small towns in these areas, and we got the supplies there. We got the armed militia into these areas to protect Texans, and they continued that as I left town and went back to Dallas. My mission at that point in time, after 5 days, was basically over, and I left and got out of the area. The first night that I was there, we had at least one team that was not part of the militia. They were there, I think, as adjutants, and I personally heard them talking about hunting people. And there were people down there that were hunting people. They were not hunting deer, they were not hunting boar, they were not hunting pigs, they were hunting people. I think some of them believed that they were hunting looters, but as I said earlier, after a day or two of being in shit at the fan in a situation where there's no water, no food, your most moralistic person might go into your neighbor's house and try and find food and water for survival. So at this point in time, you have people who aren't necessarily looters, but people who are just trying to survive, and if they looked like looters, they were being shot. They were hunting people. By that night, I had 100 to 150 very tacked out armed teams ready to protect Texans. Ready to go into these small towns and these neighborhoods and make sure that people were not getting locked in, make sure they were getting aid coming into them, and making sure that the government was not allowing people to be killed, whether it was by the release of these dams and the flooding for a second time, not from the hurricane, but they were flooding these areas for a second time. And my security guy informed me that what they were doing was basically flushing the toilet on Port Arthur, and the bodies that they had seen from the hurricane, whether they were full of bullet holes or whether they were just flood victims, were not there during the second flooding. They had not been collected, they were being washed out to sea. Those bodies are not being recorded in the body counts that are happening down there. And now that FEMA and National Guard took over and suspended all rescue operations, people are, they're bringing in prison ships. And I'm going to tell you right now, do not get on their fucking prison ships, because you might not come back. They're allowing the sharks and the fish to eat the bodies that go out to sea, just like they did in Hurricane Katrina. And with millions of people being displaced from their homes and their neighborhoods, you might go missing forever, and they think that you just bugged out and went somewhere else in the country and can't find you. But a lot of these people are going out to sea and never coming back. Told these federal agents to get out of their way because they were going in to save Texans. We head over to the local Walmart and Academy store where they were setting up the FEMA Fusion Center and makeshift hospital, and they had a helipad there to be able to do rescues and stuff. So they were using the Walmart stores and they were using the parking lots there and stuff. There were already lines lining up at the Walmart stores that were at least 2 miles long, and people were being rationed 1 case of water, 1 loaf of bread. It was very socialistically done. This is how FEMA works things. They don't always give people what they need. They just give them little pieces here and there. And it's done in a systematically government-controlled socialistic way. And basically there was bread lines forming, and that's exactly what was happening there at that FEMA center. We rallied there and met up with some other first responders, where we finally took another convoy down into the downtown Beaumont area on a very crazy ride, where we had people on the highway trying to break up our convoy and trying to wreck into our cars, and we're pulling boats. Like, this is not the best thing for us to be involved in, with people trying to run us off the road while we're in a convoy. But there was obviously people that were trying to break up the convoy. I was able to keep it close to the head of the line of the civilians that were involved in this operation and bringing boats in, because they didn't have the resources to do what they needed to do. It was such a wide destruction area. We get into downtown Beaumont, and we station in this big parking lot in the middle of downtown, and this is where the State Department official rallied us all together, and he said, I'm not here. I was never here. I never got you guys in here. But now you're on your own, and here's the scenario. They're getting ready to release the dam here, and within the next hour, you're going to be under 4 foot of water. Find high ground, you're on your own. They left us there to die. They left us there to drown. They didn't give any more information than that. Our guys started bringing in reports of lots of bodies being in the water, and the body count that's being talked about in Texas is not in the 60s. It's probably more like in the thousands, because they didn't recover any of these bodies before they released the water from the dam. So what happened was, when they released the water from the dam, those bodies were being washed out to sea. And my security advisor that was there as I was putting together our own militia fusion center was giving me reports back from their boats and from the people that were in the water of bodies that they were seeing with bullet holes in them. They would simply tag these bodies around their ankle or around their wrist and leave them in the water, because when you're in search and rescue, it's a biohazard to bring a dead body onto your boat, and you basically GPS mark where they're at, and later on they can be recovered after the flooding, because we were there to pull out live bodies out of the water and out of these neighborhoods. But what I was told by local officials and by the State Department official that was there with us was that they were going to be doing gun confiscations because of the violence that had been happening in that area. And I think we all know from Katrina and other things that gun confiscations not only is not going to fucking happen in Texas, it's not going to happen again because of life safety, because of life safety. So we had about $50,000 to $100,000 worth of supplies show up in the form of medical supplies, food, water, and all these different things. 100 to 150 very tacked out, very capable armed militiamen. And like I said, these are not the people that you see bullshitting on the internet. These are actual 3%ers that showed up and were about it and ready to go. About 3 o'clock in the morning on the last night that I was there, private contractors showed up, and they were very angry about some of the things that were going on. They demanded that I hand over those supplies, and I dispersed my men and women that were there for the safety of Texans. And I refused. And I told him very strictly to his face that you're not going to tell me to disarm. I've been a part of the open carry movement. I was PR director of a very large organization, and if he was going to threaten me in that manner, I would make a very quick phone call and make sure that 1,000 armed people showed up and were ready to continue the job that we were doing. We were approached by local officials who, the police and others, who told us that we were not allowed to have guns, we were not allowed to be armed while we were there, and that they were going to come and take our guns and not allow us to be a part of that. So those of you who don't understand right now, there is a civil war happening in this country, and I saw it firsthand on the Texas coast. There are federal officials who were there who were wanting to lock down roads and wanting to wash these bodies out to sea, and there were government officials there that were supporting us in the life safety of saving Texans' lives, pulling them out of their neighborhoods and making sure that they were getting supplies and safety and medical attention. And there were those who were trying to control the situation and lock it down, taking over supply routes and supply chains of Texans who were sending aid and sending people, and they were confiscating it. And like I said in the beginning of the video, it was, I think half of it was because there were people there to do bad deeds, and I think that there were people there who, instead of being caught up in that, would rather lock the roads down and not let you get cameras in and not let you get the stories out so that it doesn't look bad on their record when it comes down. They were allowing bodies to be washed out to sea because it's better to let that happen and then be missing persons instead of another body count on their local county or their area. After about 72 hours of not having water or food, somebody who is highly moralistic, like a pastor or somebody, would very quickly resort to robbery or theft or hurting somebody else to make sure that they had a way to live. You go back to your carnal nature of survival. I've been through a lot of things, even with the open carry movement, that I have risked my life over the years, but I'm already a dead man. I mean, I know I'm going to die one day, and my soul's redeemed, so it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is doing the right thing and letting people know what's actually going on.
I'm going to sit down here with Jake, who's got his dog Bubba. Jake, who is homeless. Jake, you found yourself some shelter here. Why are you outside during this entire hurricane?
Well, I chose not to go inside yesterday because the Salvation Army and Russian Winds homeless shelter where they were accepting people were caught killing everybody that was in there.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Okay. All right. So clearly you're homeless.
Were caught killing everybody that was in there.